Is the United Nations still fit for purpose? It's a question that has been posed quite often in recent times. The United Nations was formed with a noble purpose in mind: to maintain international peace and security, to foster friendly relations among nations, and to achieve international cooperation in solving global problems. It has been the world stage where nations come together to discuss, debate, and hopefully resolve issues of global importance. But what happens when the world is faced with unprecedented challenges? We've seen riots in Pakistan over alleged blasphemy, an economy struggling with the aftermath of a pandemic, inflation, and an energy crisis. We've seen the rise of paramilitary groups and armed rebellions threatening political stability, and the re-emergence of the Taliban posing new challenges. How has the United Nations responded to these events? Have their actions been effective, or have they fallen short of their intended purpose? As we delve deeper into these events, we will try to answer the question: is the United Nations still fit for purpose? In recent world events, the United Nations' role and effectiveness have been put to the test. Let's first consider the riots in Jallianwala Tehsil of Faisalabad, where allegations of blasphemy ignited violence, disproportionately affecting the Christian community. In response, the United Nations called for peace, urging all parties to respect religious freedoms and uphold the rule of law. But the question remains, was this enough? Could more proactive measures have been taken to prevent such an event? Moving on, we delve into the economic challenges faced by Pakistan, a combination of the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, and an energy crisis. The United Nations has provided aid and counsel, but the country's woes persist. This raises the question: should the UN be doing more to aid struggling economies? Or is it simply beyond their remit? Next, we examine the armed rebellion in Russia by the Wagner paramilitary group. This event posed a direct threat to Russia's leadership and stability. The UN, in its capacity, condemned the violent uprising and pushed for diplomatic solutions. But again, we must ask, is condemnation and dialogue enough in the face of such aggression? Finally, we scrutinize the challenges posed by the Taliban's Afghanistan to Pakistan. The UN has been actively involved in mediating dialogue and pushing for stability in the region. However, the persistent tension suggests that more needs to be done. In each of these situations, the United Nations has certainly not remained a silent spectator. Yet the effectiveness of its responses is open to debate. The UN has consistently advocated for peace, dialogue, and respect for human rights. But in a world increasingly marked by conflict and inequity, are these principles enough? Can diplomatic dialogue and condemnation effectively combat aggression and economic instability? Indeed, these events have tested the United Nations' mettle. But are these responses enough to say that the United Nations is still fit for purpose? Scene script. Having analyzed the United Nations' actions in recent events, we now attempt to summarize its fitness for purpose. In our discussion, we've seen the United Nations addressing a plethora of global issues. From the riots in Jallianwala Tehsil of Faisalabad to the economic challenges Pakistan faces due to the COVID-19 pandemic, inflation, and energy crisis, the United Nations' involvement has been pivotal. However, the effectiveness of its actions and whether they fulfill the organization's purpose is a subject of debate. The United Nations was founded for the purpose of promoting peace and security, fostering friendly relations among nations, achieving international cooperation, and being a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. But has it been successful in fulfilling these objectives? Take the situation in Afghanistan, for instance. The rise of the Taliban poses a significant challenge not just to Afghanistan but also to neighboring countries like Pakistan. The United Nations has been involved in the peace process, but the instability continues. Similarly, in the case of the Wagner paramilitary group threatening the Russian leadership, the United Nations' role remains unclear. Moreover, the United Nations is expected to be a platform for countries to exchange ideas and build capacities. While this has been observed in some cases, such as the academic exchange interest shown between Kyrgyzstan and Pakistan, it's not always the case. The effectiveness of the United Nations in fostering such collaborations is yet another aspect to consider. Considering these points, it becomes apparent that while the United Nations has been involved in a multitude of global issues, its effectiveness varies from case to case. In some situations, it's been able to promote peace and foster international cooperation, but in others, its efforts have fallen short. So, is the United Nations still fit for purpose? It's a question that remains open-ended and perhaps one that only time can truly answer.